I guess with how much I work, time freedom is not that important to me. So if financial or geography is definitely a lot more important because I came here as a very poor immigrant and I know what not having financial freedom is like. Like being scared of something happening is a terrible feeling. So just being in a spot where you don't have to spend all your money, but just knowing that if something bad happened, you could deal with it.
Welcome to the American Dream Builder and Investor podcast, where our vision is to inspire busy professionals, especially first and second generation immigrants and Americans, to explore the state of the American dream in 2022 and beyond. That is the Trinity of Freedom: time, financial, and geography freedom. I'm your host, Missy Liu, and I have achieved financial independence, and I'm helping many others to do the same. I started out with $5,000 and have really built wealth for my family along the process. Now, I'm on a mission to help hundreds of thousands of people like me to do the same.
All right, welcome to another episode of the American Dream Builder and Investor podcast. I'm your host, Missy Liu. Today we have a special guest, a friend. Her name is Nainika Suheendra. She is a coworker through my other job at Walmart. Also, she's a real estate investor. She just actually got started investing last year through her primary residence. And I want to tell you a little about her because she's getting started in the space right before she goes into her master's program at Harvard. I feel her example can give people who are getting started in the space some inspirations and also give parents who may have kids about to go to school some inspirations how they can help their kids get started in this and build a legacy of freedom for their whole family. Nainika, she's a double graduate of the University of Tennessee. She's actually starting her MBA program at Harvard Business School in the fall of 2023, but I was just recently told that she actually got a scholarship to study in China for a full year before she start at Harvard next year. And she's actually now in Boston working remote for Walmart. In her spare time, she likes to fly planes, hang out with her friends, and try new recipes. Without further ado, I'd like to introduce Nainika.
Lucy, thank you. And thanks for letting me come on and have a little conversation with you.
Okay, so now, Nainika, we just talked about your formal bio that people love to see on the resume. But we know that our podcast is special because we want to dive into a story from American Dream standpoint. We know that you're also a first-generation immigrant from our conversations in the past. And you came to the U.S. when you were young at 4 years old with your father who came as a doctor. And I know that your experience of the American dream has many levels, but one of them was about having home ownership. And can you talk us through, what your American dream of home ownership has been like since you just recently purchased your property? And just as a note to the listeners as well, right now, even though we're recording this in 2022, but we're not releasing this until 2023, so there's a lag in some of the conversation in terms of what's happening in the market.
So I would say how my American dream has progressed is I've finally been able to buy a house because I didn't even have citizenship until I was 19, even though I came here when I was 4, just because of how long that process was for Indians with the lottery system and everything. And we're just lucky that my dad was a high potential alien as a doctor because a lot of people got denied on their first try and maybe had to go back. And I have seen with my cousins as well with COVID that a lot of them went back to school to be able to stay here. So it is a circuitous journey. And so I'd say like buying a house is like the fulfillment of the first step in my dream to like fully be here and established in America, because that was a right that was not afforded to me until pretty late. So
No, I mean, you're still relatively young in your 20s and you already purchased a home. And most Americans may not have purchased a home during that time. So I would say you're just in your heart, I feel you're already fairly ahead in that. But I understand the struggle of immigration, especially when a country like the US has opened up the border to have high potential talent like your father to migrate to this country. But then after you get here, it still takes such a long time due to other things involved, like per country quota, for example. So I was really curious because for me, similarly, in terms of my process, it took a long time. but I didn't come here when I was 4. I came here when I was 16. So I was kind of already having a lot of my identities and thoughts developed. So you came here at 4. Basically, you felt like you are part of the culture and economy, but meanwhile you weren't. How did that make you feel in that process?
I actually wrote my Harvard admissions essay about this experience. I had written a poem, I think, when I was like 19, around when I got my citizenship. It was just kind of like the title was like Immigrant. Don't tell our host bodies. Like, only we know why they call us alien. Don't tell our host bodies if they were just built to bear the weight of other people's expectations. Only we know we are synecdoches, that people build their prototypes of everyone we left back home. So I think like anything I did, growing up in the rural South, I was the only Indian in the whole city, in my school, of course, and then in the whole city. And so it was just kind of interesting that anything I did was taken to be representative of every Indian ever. Um, and I think that was, it's kind of hard because you go home and you don't belong there. And so you're alienated when you're home, and then you come here and you're called an alien. And so it's like, where do you really belong? And I think it's given me like the ability to make friends with basically any community, because I've had to blend in with basically any community, and have a lot more empathy for sure. Because I think like people just see people that are very different from them and don't want to
Mhm.
engage. And I've never felt that way. So I think I like to describe the stages of like leadership in my life as maybe like I'm a chandelier. There was a point where I was finding my light and figuring out who I was, and then taking it and then shattering it, which is what a chandelier does, and distributing and democratizing it. Ultimately, it like comes together in the same vision and everybody looks up to it, and like it is one thing. But I think the importance of being a leader is like sharing and democratizing. So I really appreciate what you've done with this club, and like allowed me to be one of the like founding marketing members and getting stuff off the ground and being able to advertise and advocate for it in every avenue. I've gotten my director to join. I've gotten people on all the other clubs that I'm on the board of at Walmart to join, and they have, every single one of them wanted to come back genuinely and found something fascinating. So I think the way that you've democratized it has been awesome. And that's kind of what I see for myself for the next couple of years.
Now I want to dive into the investing portion because you've been involved in the club from the beginning, the club we helped found together. And from there, you purchased your first home in one of the most expensive cities in the US. Walk us through for people who are similar to you, right? Like, for example, in Arkansas, it's relatively affordable to purchase a home, right? 200, high 200 to 300,000 maybe get you a very starting home. Now it's probably like to high 300,000, but but in markets like California, San Francisco, Bay Area, or New York City, or Boston, in your case, it's hard for people to get into a home, a condo, because the price is so high. So what other people would have just purchased 2 or 3 houses with, and it may be like the price of one tiny condo in Boston with the same purchasing power. So how did you use your investor mindset, and how did you convince yourself, okay, now is the time to buy and purchase it? Like, what knowledge did you use throughout the process,
I
and
think
mindset too?
This podcast is sponsored by Life Mission Capital, founded by me, Missy Liu, where my life mission is to help busy professionals invest well so they can focus on what matters. All my life, I was taught to study and work hard for my freedom, until one day I realized that unless I let my money work hard for me, I will always be trading my most precious resource, time, for freedom. Since then, we have also been helping our investors passively diversify into more than 1,000 units of recession and inflation-resistant alternative investments, such as multifamily, mobile home parks, short-term rentals, and more. Learn more with our free ebooks at lifemissioncapital.com.
you
Mhm.
personally helped me with the financials. I knew I was not going to make a profit on this house in terms of like the daily, or not the daily, but the monthly mortgage. I wasn't going to see a right away return, but it was the stuff and the resources provided by the real estate investment club that you started that helped me to consider the right things when making the decision. I was searching for a home in Boston for a year. I started in 2020, prices were exploding. And then this place popped up. It just happened to be built by a community development corporation that said, owners have to be occupants so that we can run investors out of this community. And so I was planning to live here for at least 3 years. So it made sense. And it made the floor of the price a lot lower than what it would have been in surrounding areas, even in the same neighborhood. And so I got it at pretty much exactly the market average, but I got it a month before rates flew up to like 5%. So I got it for 3.4% borrowing. And then some of the things that I considered through the real estate investment club was sort of a little bit the return on investment, but also like all the different factors that you consider for a neighborhood. So, like the transit, way that the neighborhood will be developed. And then also from a supply chain perspective, I just thought like this place is 16 minutes walking to the Harvard campus. And like, even if Boston's no longer a biotech hub, higher education falls out of style and people are like, I'll just do edX. And that's the same as going to Harvard. The thing is, Boston's a port city, so you will always need to bring stuff in. This will never run out of people. And I thought where I live, is not the expensive neighborhood, it's developing. And one thing I learned from the real estate club is that if you buy the luxury homes in the luxury areas, that's what crashes during a recession. This is for middle class families. It's I think like 1,100 square feet. It's a normal sized condo. And so something like this will always be there, and it will always capture people who have maybe been shaken out of the luxury market and need to move back down to the middle class, or people who are economically moving upward and now can afford a place in the middle class. So it kind of captures people from both ends of the spectrum, and it was reasonable for where I wanted to live. And then of course I will be guaranteed to sell it when I move out because of the way that the deed is written. And so it's in an area where transit will be input. It's in sort of an artistic neighborhood. And so generally those are the ones that sadly get gentrified. So I think as this gentrifies, it will move up. Since I bought it in March, Zillow says that it's gone up 43,000, and I wouldn't be surprised.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, awesome. And it's a great location. Location really drives so many things. And the concept you referred, I do recall talking about in many places, not necessarily me, maybe the speakers we had, but the concept is in a lot of times, like apartment purchases, for example, same applies to other type of hotels or other purchases as well. Class A, Class B, Class C. A is kind of the luxury style. B is kind of like, it's not like working class, Class C, but it's kind of in the middle. So you got some of the amenities, but it's also age. Class A usually tend to be a lot newer, but in Boston, there's probably not that many new builds.
I believe
I
this,
don't know.
this house is 122 years old. It was just got renovated in 2020, so it looks shiny.
Yeah, because I think cities like Boston, I remember being there, they were all like pretty old houses that looks very historical. So I think B is a fairly good place to be, but at the end of the day, it's really about the purchase itself and what you can do with the property. So it's good that you found something in the middle because I recall that you don't intend to do like heavy renovations to really improve the property, etc., since it's already somewhat done. So it's good that you pick somewhere in the middle without exposing yourself to too much of a risk when you move out. Like, let's say if you don't intend to sell it, you tend to rent it out. Like if it's too lower class, perhaps you may have some late payments and things like that you have to manage from maybe in another country studying some space programs at the time and or too high worrying about the crashes and etc. And I think it was also smart of you, if I recall, this place has another bedroom that you're basically leasing it out to gain extra income, right? So
Yeah, so I don't make a profit on this, and I knew I wouldn't based on the math you helped me do, but I get half my mortgage paid for with my roommate, and that helps because I'm spending only, I think, 300 or 400 more here than I was in Arkansas to rent. Um,
mm,
and so it just makes sense because rent control here is not a thing, and I've had friends have their rents raised by like $600 in Arkansas, and it you can't do that here, but I just knew that every year it would go up. And I have friends obviously that are already in the MBA program and they are paying 39.50 a month for 450 square feet. So they're paying more than my mortgage for one third of the space. And I looked at that and I said that makes no sense. I can get a really nice house paying 4,000 a month in mortgage. So
yeah, no, that's good. Yeah. So I feel you've run the numbers to consider this as an investment, maybe not necessarily from a cash flow standpoint, but in terms of the quality of life it provides you. And
yeah.
also an investment appreciation is such a good location. So I love the math behind that. Now, in the future, going forward, what are you thinking in terms of your investments? I know you're going to be in school for some time, so that's going to be mostly outgoing expenses and things like that you'll be taking on. But let's say after the school or even in the school, what are your future plans in that space?
I think that's one thing that would be really good about if I got the scholarship that I wanted, because I would have the time to figure that out. And because it's fully funded, I would get someone to take over this room. I have actually, my future roommate is a friend that I've known for 5 years, and he has some of his stuff in the living room. And so I would just have him come and take this room because I know him very well. And so this mortgage I wouldn't have to worry about. I would have a little bit of money coming in through the stipend for the scholarship program. So figuring out next steps is on my agenda, and things would change depending on whether I go for that scholarship or not. So if I go straight to school next year and don't get the scholarship, then I think the free cash flow would be quite low after paying for tuition and just like club expenses and just school trips and stuff like that, as well as, of course, textbooks and whatnot. So I think with that in mind, I would have to get a little bit more creative in what I do. I would probably pick up a part-time job and then figure out what I could do in terms of investments there. I think it would be kind of more of a group effort. So being a co-investor in something rather than buying something outright myself, because I just would not have the funds to do that. So I'm going to have to kind of start from scratch on my investment strategy. And so that's something that I was hoping to have an extra year to figure out.
Yeah, no, time is on your side, right? With the school and stuff. I think that's the magic thing about schools. It gives you time to figure things out. And with your purchase there and future things, we'll have time to figure those things out. I really think the approach you're taking by like moving to Boston and purchasing a home is the right decision. Obviously, that all depends on the price and etc. And it sounds like you made the right decision. And I want to use this as inspiration for any parents who are sending their kids to go to school in certain places. For example, I know someone who's from Austin. They purchased a duplex for their daughter to live in. And their daughter, who's going to school, is basically their mini landlord almost. She lives in one of the rooms while she has other roommates and then watches over the other side of the duplex. And at the end of the day, it's really good investment if you can figure out things like location, price, and etc. Because you already have a person living there helping you watch things, and it most importantly teaches your kids about finances and investment. I think that's a lesson that it's hard to teach otherwise. Because sometimes kids are so spoiled, and I don't have kids, but I'm speaking from my younger sibling standpoint. They're so spoiled. So anytime to help them learn a little bit, I love the opportunity. Now, moving to the end of the show, I have a few questions that I usually ask all the guest speakers. So, starting with, what's your life mission? And life mission is like the underlying motivation behind everything you do, and you may or may not have it. And just because we're all exploring, constantly evolving, but that's something I always like to ask because with my company, it's called Life Mission Capital, and I want to help people achieve their life mission. So I'm always curious about what the guest speakers are in terms of their life mission.
I think they definitely want to help people find their purpose, because I think as life changes, once they have saying that, they kind of revolve everything else around. And so a lot of people, especially at my age, are still struggling to figure that out. And I just think life gets a lot better when you do have one focus.
Mm-hmm. Purpose, helping people finding purpose. I love it. What about the topic of freedom? We talked about that a little bit, time, financial, and geography freedom. What does that mean to you? And how important are they and why?
I guess with how much I work, time freedom is not that important to me. So financial or geography is definitely a lot more important, because I came here as a very poor immigrant, and I've known what not having financial freedom is like. And of course I was happy, but like being scared of something happening is a terrible feeling. So just being in a spot where you don't have to spend all your money, but just knowing that if something bad happened, you could deal with it. That's number one. And then I would say geography after that. Like I advocated for a remote position in my role, and I would do it again. Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah, it's hard to find remote jobs in the Walmart where you work right now.
Yeah.
So, yeah. And if you were to do it all over again, in terms of your journey so far, is there anything you would do differently?
I would have bought a house as soon as I moved to Arkansas. I just thought I couldn't handle a mortgage and an apartment at once. But if I asked my parents for help or anything, it would have paid off. I would have paid my parents back and then some, and maybe paid my tuition. I really wish I had done that. Yeah. And then as far as like educationally, maybe I would have just gone straight into something involving space rather than being like, choose the safe path and then move on to the riskier path.
Yeah. Or the good thing is you're learning, so we're always evolving. So I guess one thing about real estate, a lot of people say is buy real estate and wait when the numbers make sense. So I'm glad you started now. You could have said the same thing after you graduated from school. So
Exactly.
yeah. And is there any books that you love that you feel like had the greatest influence on you that you like to share with the audience?
So I think like when people ask me like the top three things that I value, I say kindness, competence, and like an anti-fragile sense of curiosity. And so obviously I'm shaped by Nassim Nicholas Taleb's book, Anti-Fragile. It just kind of feels like that's the way that I live my life. Like whenever there's been something that could potentially be seen as like a setback, like I just learn something from it and come back better. And I think that's really good. But also anything Oscar Wilde has written, The Portrait of Dorian Gray shaped me, and then A Gentleman in Moscow. Because I think that whole book was like an upward arc of positivity. And I'm teaching myself Russian since the past year because one of my best friends is a Russian Jewish girl. And it was a very shallow reason. I just thought she sounded nice when she talked, but I was like, yeah, I want to sound like you. And then I read that book and it just kind of encapsulates like the Russian approach to trials and tribulations and difficulty. Like one thing that their culture values a lot is competence as well. And so like I had this whole like life philosophy and then I was like, wow, this is very Russian actually. Like doing something wrong or badly is like, why do it at all? And of course, that's not the way that you should look at things in black and white, but I agree that like you should strive to be your best, even in the face of very difficult circumstances. And so that book was just very uplifting fictional read, but it related to me. And I think like the best thing you can do is lend specificity to the universal, and that's how you reach people.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's awesome. I love how you're looking at those cultural aspect of things. And it's not just because culture is cool, but also, especially in times like now, there's so much geopolitical conflict among cultures and nations. And sometimes we forget that it's people at the end of the border or etc. And there is so much to be learned from humanity and the history and etc. So I love it when you shine light on those things.
All right, coming to the end of the show, Nainika has shared with us her experiences of getting started into real estate from feeling unable to achieve homeownership until later part of the 20s to actually purchased a condo in one of the most expensive cities in the US to also having a roommate to rental arbitrage and maybe even after she moves away from Boston, if she decides to do that, she can also rent it out. So real estate sometimes isn't that complicated. It doesn't have to be purchase a whole car wash, apartment buildings. It could just be simple house hacking, which is what she's doing. So I want to give this as an inspiration for others. One of the regrets she talked about is she wished she had done it sooner. So buy real estate and wait. If the deal numbers make sense, you're not losing money in it after you factor in reserves and expenses, you should consider doing it because real estate appreciates over time. Unlike the stock market has a lot more turbulences, the real estate market, it does have cycles, but it's a lot more stable and continues to go up through time. Of course, this is not financial advice. You should always talk to your CPA or financial professionals before making financial decisions. But I'm sharing some of the common knowledge that I and other investors have learned throughout the years. So thank you so much for listening. And thank you, Nainika.
Thank you, Missy. It's always fun talking to you.
We'll link her bio and also her LinkedIn profile in the show notes section. So feel free to check it out if you want to reach out to her. Thank you again. And I look forward to seeing you in the next episode of The American Dream Builder and Investor.
Thank you so much for tuning in to the American Dream Builder and Investor podcast with me, Missy Liu. We hope you enjoy the tips and tricks that others have used to build their American dream and their trinity of freedom. We would love for you to subscribe and leave a rating and a review. You can also find all the episodes and details on lifemissioncapital.com. Until then, let your life mission go wild.